Okay.
Got this on.
Okay. Okay, good evening, Rabbi. I don't know what the Seder is usually here, and I don't mean to come into anyone's territory. Whoever would like will be learning a section of a Maimer in Likutei Torah, Dvar in the Pashas Vaschanan and Daf Yud Aleph, the second column. The Maimer begins with the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'Ahavta Chulu. This Maimer also appears in Eira Torah of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he brings many more questions, and he adds a lot of biur to the Maimer. So the Alter Rebbe asks a few questions. V'tzarich lahavin lama hiskir beis pa'amim havaya. So why does the pasuk say obviously Hashem twice? The Tzemach Tzedek also asks, why does it say Hashem Elokeinu in the possessive form? Generally speaking, in all of Torah, generally speaking, in all of Torah, it says Hashem Elokechem, Elokecha. Why does it say Elokeinu? It's unusual. Even the Tzemach Tzedek points out that even in the Hemshech HaPsukim, V'Ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. So it says Elokecha. It's only in what he refers to as the pasuk Hayichud. Only the pasuk that declares Hashem's unity, Hashem's oneness, that he uses the lashon Elokeinu. In addition, he asks V'oid lama hifsiku anshe knesses hagdoila bein echad leviahavta bebaruch shem kfeid machus elaylam v'oid. Why would anshe knesses hagdoila be misaken an interruption between the psukim as they appear in the Torah? That between Shema and V'ahavta we should say Baruch Shem. Gam tzarich lahavin pirush Shema. What does the word Shema mean? That in addition to meaning to listen, to hear, it also means lashon asifa, to gather. Milashon, like it says, Vayishama Shol esa'am, that Shol gathered the people. The Gam, the word Shema, is also lashon havana, also means to understand. If we develop the idea mitzad Chassidishe for a moment, when a person sees something, so when a person looks at a phenomenon, they don't necessarily have to understand it. But when a person hears something, they receive all the details. And that allows for a certain deeper understanding of what's happening. Yud Aleph, in Dvarim, Yud Aleph, by every Chumash he starts again. Pashas Vaschanan, yeah. So Shema is also Lashon Havana. V'hinei v'ahavta Lashon Tzivui, v'ahavta is a command. You should love. V'gam Lashon Osid, you will love. So here, underlying is the question of the Magid, how could you command someone to love? Right? We can't, either you love or you don't love. So the Magid explains that the commandment is to be mizbainen. And the hizbainenus will lead to the osid, that you will. Pirush, she'emer hakosov. The Alter Rebbe here, the way the Alter Rebbe phrases it as a question, the Alter Rebbe says we see that Yidden say Shema twice a day, they're Mekayim the mitzvah, and they don't have Avas Hashem. So how could the Pasuk say that V'ahavta is Lashon Osid? She'emer HaKosov, she'kesheyamik b'daitoi, v'yovin she'avaya echad, yovin lebechinas V'ahavta, Lashon Osid, b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. Meaning, she'afilu ha'yetzer hara hu nichna botl l'gabi avas Hashem, that not stam ava, not that you'll just have avas Hashem, but that even your yetzer hara will love Hashem. V'hinei, kol echad ve'echad eimer beis pa'amim b'chol yom. Every yid recites twice a day Krias, Shachris, ve'arvis, ve'afal pikein, einu magim lebechinas v'ahavta. They don't reach it. The Alter Rebbe is not judging people. People come into Yechidus and they say, Rebbe, I don't have Avos Hashem. And obviously they're saying Krishma twice a day. The Alter Rebbe comes to a biur. The biur is, Ki hinei ksiv. The Pasuk says, Re'ei lefanecha, nosati lefanecha yemes achayim, ubacharta b'achayim, la'avos Hashem aleikecha. The Alter Rebbe adds the words, b'chol levavcha, ki hu chayecha. So the Pasuk says, choose life. The Eibishter says, I placed before you life and death. Choose life. Love Hashem because He hu chayecha, He's your life. Hainu. The Pasuk's instruction is that kol echad ve'echad shereitze l'aved Hashem tzarich leida b'tchila habchira shaloi. You have to know what you're choosing. V'lochein ksivu b'charta b'chayim. Asks the Alter Rebbe a simple question: who won't choose life? Everyone, of course, everyone wants life. So v'tzarich lahavin mihu she'ein reitze livcher b'chayim. Who doesn't want to choose life? Everyone loves to live. A person who loves to live, how is it expressed? By taking care of themselves, by eating well, by sleeping well, by taking care of yourself begashmius. And it seems that this is the opposite of what the Torah is prescribing. He says, Mi she'oyev chayim, hu adarabe, oyev hahepuch. He enjoys taivus. How could the Pasuk say, Ubacharta b'chayim la'avas Hashem aleikecha? V'haloi hayetzahara oyeves hachayim. The Yetzahara loves life. Ach, tzorich leida, says the Alter Rebbe, we have to know, what is this life? Ma nikra chayim. So now the Alter Rebbe brings a fascinating biur. The Alter Rebbe brings what we find. The Alter Rebbe goes back to Parshas Bereishis. In Parshas Bereishis, we find that when Hashem created the spread, the Rakia, and the Rakia divided between Mayim Elyonim and Mayim Tachtoinim, the upper waters and the lower waters. The Alter Rebbe says that the heart is the source of all life. And really, there are two forms of life that come from the heart. There's emotional living or spiritual living, and there's physical living. You know, it's fascinating that if food gets stuck in the windpipe, choking we have such a strong reaction to choking. It's so immediate. What's happening, says the Alter Rebbe, is that we're crossing physical life and spiritual life. In other words, Eivare Haneshima, breath, represents spiritual. It's a physical manifestation of spiritual living. Breath is like a hybrid between Ruchnius and Gashmius. And that's why sound is also this idea of a Ruchni Shebegashmi, a combination of Ruchnius and Gashmius. That's why a voice could also express emotion. Even though generally we say that emotion is something that we can't touch with our five senses. It's a spiritual thing, it's a feeling. But really, there are ways, besides facial expressions, which, by the way, are one of the distinctions, going back to Parshas Bereishis, about the guf and the nefesh of a human being versus other mammals, is that other mammals their emotion is they're less, there's less expression of their spiritual state on their bodies than with human beings. And the Alter Rebbe explains in Bereishis that the reason for that is because by a human being, the guf and the nefesh came separately. By the other Balei Chaim, they toitzei haaretz, they emerged, the guf and the nefesh together. So the ability for real ruchnius to be expressed in real gashmius is limited. Mashenkin in the guf, it's more present, and that's why also the Mittel Rebbe writes that it takes a much longer time for humans to develop than other animals, than other mammals. Others in a short time. Some animals, they could walk within a few minutes from when they're born, and some of them come to full growth within 2 years or whatever it is. By human beings, it takes a long time. So what the Alter Rebbe is explaining is that the Lev is the source of two types of chayas, of spiritual chayas. And the Alter Rebbe emphasizes that we also have, thank you, the Alter Rebbe emphasizes that we also have that the liba polig l'chol shaifin, that the moyach, that the mind is also sustained by the heart. We also find in halacha there's a concept of the dam shehaneshama tluya boy. There's a certain amount of blood which is considered that life is dependent on that amount of dam. And the Sfarim explained that that's the dam that equals the amount of blood in the heart. So living is in the heart, represents life in the spiritual sense of what it means to be a medaber. And then the heart is also obviously the force of physical life. And what happens is in the body, there's a membrane. There's a mechitza, there's a chotzer that divides, below the diaphragm, that divides between the Eivarei Haneshima, the respiratory system, and the digestive system. And this all the Alter Rebbe explains in the Maimer, that the digestive system, the purpose of the digestive system is to extract the pure blood, and that's going to be fed to the heart. So it's really all about the heart. And the Alter Rebbe says that in all of this is in the Nimshal. That in the Eibishter, that Hashem is a heart. Levaftini achoisi kalo in Shir Hashirim. We have a pasuk Tilim Tzur Levavi. Tzur is Hashem. Hatzur Tamim Pa'aloi. So Hashem, Tzur Levavi. Hashem is my heart. And Hashem is the source of two types of chayas. There's a spiritual chayas and there's a physical chayas. The physical chayas are all the physical olamis, and the mazolis, the constellations, and so on. And then the spiritual chayas, that's like the purpose of living. That's the ruchni izdika chayas. And that's our avoida, to reach for mayim elyonim, that the purpose of our life should be not for the mayim tachtoinim, which are there to push away the psoilas. The whole function of the digestive system is to hold on to. He brings an example of a strainer to get rid of all the psoilas. So we don't want to be in that space to get rid of all the junk. We don't want to be in the place that we're getting dropped off. We want to be in that part of life that's in the real chayim, in the mayim elyonim. So let's see how the Alter Rebbe describes it, and of course, there are many different elements. So let's take a look. Ach tzorich leida man nikra chayim. Hine ksiv. So the first word on the line is ach. Hine ksiv, the pasuk says, Vayemer elohim yehi rakia, v'hi mavdil, there should be a spread, and it should divide. And then it says, Vayas elikim es harakia. Hashem made the firmament. Vayavdil, he divided. Vein hamayim Hashem mitachas l'rokia, uvein hamayim Hashem me'al l'rokia. V'tzorich lahavin. Asks the Alter Rebbe, and the Mittel Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, they open up this question incredibly. What's going on over here? Hashem created the world with speech. Bidvar Hashem shamayim nasu. And what does it say? Vayas elikim. Hashem made. Vayomer, Hashem said. So why is it that here suddenly there's another pasuk? Vayaz, a whole development. Hashem made. What does it say by light? Vayomer elikim yehi oyer, vayehi oyer. So it should have said the same thing. Vayehi rokia. But no, it doesn't say vayehi rokia. It says vayaz elikim vayavdel. He divided. We don't find by any of the other sayings. Hashem said, let there be, and there was, and he separated.
And the Tzemach Tzedek brings that maybe because by the heavens there's a pasuk that says clearly, Bidvar Hashem Shamayim Nasu, so it clarifies that the heavens were created by Hashem's words, therefore it's okay to say Vayas Elikim. But he says, what do you mean? We have another pasuk that says about the heavens, Ma'aseh Ba'osov, that they're the doings of his hands. So maybe Fakert, he should have been careful not to say Vayas. Anyway, it's a whole discussion. To understand why it is that this is described in such a way, let's take a look at the human condition. The heart vivifies, the heart keeps us alive. Lahavdil, we don't have to talk about such extremes, but today a person could be in a state where they're brain dead, chas v'sholem, but the body is still alive. So the heart is where the life is. The mashal, the hainu. Al derech mashal, he says, for instance, his havus hakoil v'hadibur. We're called a medaber. So speech, sound. Hushenimshach me'alev l'hareya. It's from the heart, through the lung. Umehareya l'kona. Yeah, into the windpipe. V'zeu, the trachea, v'zeu, koil, v'dibur. This is speech. So now the Alter Rebbe is speaking about spiritual life. We're not talking about the gashmias of life. We're talking about the human being as a medaber. V'gam afilu hamoyach mekabel chayis min alev she'ela min alev lameach lachshev laharer, instincts, impulses, those thoughts that Chassidus explains, they've come up, it's from the heart, it's desire that drives the thought. That's the ruchnius of the heart. The spiritual condition of the person. The lev is also the source of chayes gashmi. And that's the dam. Hanimshach me'alev l'chol ha'evorim. Umizeh, the blood keeps the body alive and nurtures the organs. And nasa gidul habasar v'dam, for those who are familiar with how this works. In other words, I don't think erosion is the right word, but whatever cells are degenerating and regenerating, that the blood is there. A person eats, and then there's the refining process in the liver and in the stomach, and the mufchar is eila lelev. The apsoilis and whatever is needed is expectorated. Yetzer derech b'nei me'ayim l'chutz. The kols, all of this happens. Who mischalik aydei aparso, that there's this separation. Shemafsekas. The hainu chatzar hakoved, what the Gemara refers to as a covering over the liver. Shehu amavdil bein evari anashima, between the respiratory system and the evari amazain, the digestive system. Kach mamish benimshol kivyachol, it's exact mamish the same way by the Eibishter. Hinix, if the pasuk says tzur levavi, Hashem is our heart. Sheklolis hachayis nimshach mimenu yizborich. Chayis comes from Hashem. Kidiksiv v'atem chayis kulam. Gashmius and ruchnius. V'hine yesh gam ken beis b'chines hashpois. Ha'alef hu anikra b'chines mayim al yoinim. The upper waters, hu tainug elyon, os tisaneg al Hashem, to take pleasure from spirituality, from ruchnius. Like everyone understands that, for instance, when we talk about nachas from children, that's a ruchnius dika tainug, and it's greater than enjoying a cupcake. We understand it's more enduring and has more meaning. So there's tainug ruchni, and here he's speaking about lisaneg al Hashem, and then the base is mayim tachtoinim. Mayim tachtoinim heim apsoilis. Tanugi elam hazeh. physical pleasures, shenim shochim al yidei aparsa v'rokia hamavdil b'mayim elyonim l'mayim tachtonim. That there is this process of separation, and there's a whole other element of pleasure, which is the mayim tachtonim, that the Eibishter nurtures, that the Eibishter gives, creates. Here, you could take it down and open it up. Bocher. The bags, you could take them down and open them up. They're meant for here, okay? V'zehu, this is the meaning of ubacharta b'chaim. The pasuk is saying, don't choose gashmi as diketayvis. Don't choose mayim tachtoinim. When the pasuk says, re'ei nosati lefanecha sachayim v'satoy v'samoves v'sara, the pasuk is saying that Hashem gave us two types of pleasure. Choose mayim elyonim. That's chayim. Yossi, there are more. On the top right shelf in the corner, there are more Likutei Torahs. Shehu bechinas eitz hachayim, and the Alter Rebbe is going to bring many more psukim to highlight, to emphasize that when the Torah says chayim, v'atem adveikim b'Hashem eleikeichem chayim kulchem hayoim. That's the mayim elyonim. So that's eitz hachayim, tainug elyon. The lima is betanugim gashmiyim, to push away, to despise physical pleasure. Meaning that's psoilas. How does a person come to this? It's geshmak. Gashmius is geshmak. So he says, "Hu al yedei krias shma shachris ve'arvis." This is by krias shma. Shma is shem ayin, and the ayin is an ayin rabasi. So now the Alter Rebbe comes in to discuss an inyan in Chassidus. So I just want to take a few minutes to discuss the idea that the Alter Rebbe shares. Generally, we talk about elikus, and the Tzemach Tzedek in Sheiresh Mitzvahs Atfila and Derech Mitzvah Secha, the Tzemach Tzedek writes that a child, when he davens, he doesn't know this level, that level. That if you write Hashem's name with certain nekudis, with these nekudis or with these letters, it means this midah and that midah. He davens to the Eibishter. Poshet, it's simple. Al da ze atinik. But in a more particular way, so creation, all of creation comes under an umbrella that we call Hishtalshelus. What is Hishtalshelus? Hishtalshelus is a certain code that all the energy that comes into the world is limited. It must be within this code. There are no stray energies in the world. Everything is patented. All the chayas in this world follows a certain formula. What is the formula? The formula are the midos of Hashem. In other words, Hashem, the way the energy of Hashem is directed and guided through midos. So everything in all of Ishtalshalus comes within the inyan of the midos. Recently we were having a discussion. It's this time of the year when mechanchim are thinking about ideas for the coming year. So we were discussing, what does it mean to be a Talmud in all 7 midos? Right? Like imagine there would be Sfiras HaOmer for students. So what is the chesed of a Talmud in a classroom? That they show their Rebbe that they're listening. In other words, they make it pleasurable to teach them. What is the Gvura? That they push away interruption, interference. Something that's distracting them. And Tiferes is that they take pride in what they learn. And Netzach is that they push through a difficult passage. Right? They come to a part that's difficult, they don't give up, they endure, they go through, they work through the Tosfos, they push through. What is Haida'ah? Haida'ah is to raise your hand and say, I don't know, I need help with this piece. That's Haida'ah. And Yesoid is to be connected with what you're learning. To feel a connection with it. This is what we're doing this week. I go out, even during lunch, we talk about it. Right? I feel a shaykhis to what we're learning. And then Malchus is to verbalize, not only to listen, not only to learn thinking, but to say, like the Gemara says in Brachos, Moitzoi Matzah Chaim. So if someone would come to me and say, why do there have to be 7 midos of a Talmud? The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos there are 4 midos. Right? There's a sponge right? But because everything in the world, the world is part of Ishtalshalos, everything has to have 7 midos. You could have 7 midos of a husband, but we'll leave that for another Magid Shir. Right? And because all of Ishtalshalos, it must be, it's forced, it has to be, and that's Shem Ayin. Shema is Shem Ayin, what is the world? The world is a formula. Oisius, Shem, what is Shem? Shem is Oisius of Ayin. Ayin are the 7 midos. Right, by the Eibishter, it's in the tens position because they're Hashem's midas. Hashem Agdula, Agvura, Vatiferes. So that's Shem Ayin. So that's Shema. And the Alter Rebbe explains that when we talk about the midas, they themselves create the world. It's not a ha'ara in other words, that's what the world is made of. It's made of Hashem's midas. Sheishes Yomim also. So here, Ayin hu Zayin midas. L'cha Hashem Agdula v'Agvura chulu. Zayin midas. Kol echad kolul me'eser. In order for a midah to be complete, they need all the other midas to work as agents for that midah. For instance, like Chassidishe explains, if a person loves someone, if someone bothers them, they step up to get in the way. That's Gvura as part of Chesed. If someone were to say, look, you're my friend, but if someone bothers you, I'm only Chesed. I can't get involved. Then that's not a friend. A friend means I could count on you when I need help. So every midah requires all the midas in order to be complete. And shame, what is shame? Who? Oisius mehamidas. That's Oisius, letters. Shehu ha'ora, hanimshach, umispashet, lahaves yesh meyayin. That shame of Hashem is what creates the world. Kahainu sheshmei yizbarech mechaye be'atzmai. The name of Hashem creates, not the ha'ora. That's the boire. The pasuk says, "Ki nizgav shmoi levadai." The name of Hashem, shmoi hu nizgav, and hoide al eretz v'shamayim. Shafilu eretz v'shamayim. Even the highest creations that we have in this world, einoi ela hoidoi. They're the glory of Hashem. Ziv ha'ara me'oisius of the letters of Hashem. And that's Dvar Hashem Shamayim Nasu, which has his Chalkus Hazman. On Sunday, Yehi Oyer, the Alter Rebbe is coming to express, again, to strengthen this idea that everything in the world has to be within Ishtalshalus, within the Midas. So Sunday is not just Sunday. Sunday is Chesed. And Monday is Gvura. And Tuesday is Tiferes. That's why on Sunday we say today is day 1. Tens of thousands of days have passed. Why are we calling it day 1? Day 1 because it's Chesed again. There's a reason why they say that, there's Monday blues or whatever the expression is. Because Monday is Gvura. So everyone experiences Monday in a certain way. And I'm sure, some of us are aware that through history people try changing the 7-day week, the different formulas. 5 days, 10 days, but somehow we're back to 7 days. All of this is continuously being recreated. Every day of the week, mizgale dvar yoim beyoim, its aspects are revealed. The Hainu, what does it mean? Its aspects, its characteristics. The Oisius, Hainu b'chinas ha'Oisius, the Hadibur, Hanimshach mi b'chinas ha'Mida shebayim hahu, the particular energy of that day. Dahainu b'yom Aleph nimshach ois yesihi oir from Chesed. B'yom Beis yehi Rakia. And then on Shabbos, hu chayzer l'mekoyrei k'moshe hoya. It recedes. In the other Ma'amarim, there's a big arichis about Shabbos. K'moshel Adam shu machashev emedaber u'k'sheyochil mediburi emimachshavtei. When you cease in whatever you're engaged in, then you're back to being at ease. Hu chayzer l'mekoyrei arishin. You're back to your original position. Kach kivyochel etzli yizbarich by the Eibishter Shabbos l'Hashem aleikecha. Upit. Now we're continuing in the pasuk. So Shema is Shem Ayin. Yisrael. What is Yisrael? Shema Yisrael. Yisrael. Who Yisrael? All of machshava. Yisrael. Also the inyan of Li Rosh. All of machshava means that Neshamis Yisrael precede the Bria of the world. And that's the inyan of Machshava. The world is created b'dibur, and thought is the origin of dibur. So the inyan of Yisrael, all of Machshava. So in other words, the position of Yisrael is greater than the world. So why is a Yid preoccupying themselves with material things, with gashmiyas? You're beyond that. That's your tachlis. That's our tafkid in the world. Gashmiyas. Ukeshamizbainin sha'avaya leikeinu, meaning shem avaya hu bechinas tzimtzum v'yespashtus v'amshoche, that the Eibishter's energy is a part of a paradigm. Liyos eleikeinu bechinas machshava ilah. Lias his havus neshamas Yisrael shenis havu mebechinas machshava ilah, meaning that the Eibishter limited himself and has applied on himself a paradigm that allowed for us to be created, and that it should be created through machshava, which is gavoya yoser from bechinas havaya echad. The Rebbe brings here a tziyun to the Chovos Halevavos. The Chovos Halevavos discusses the difference between echad and yachid, between singular and oneness. And he discusses that in creation, we talk about Hashem echad, Hashem being one. One is a number, we say one and then two. Vayhi erev vayivoker yom echad, and then yom sheni. So really it's inappropriate to use the lashon, to use the expression Hashem echad for Hashem. Like we say in Yishtabach, Yochid chei ho'elamim, that the Eibishter is Yochid, or in Baruch Sha'amar, singular. So in Shema Yisrael, the second Hashem is Hashem Echad. Why are we referring to Hashem as Hashem is one? Because it's incorporating all of Bria. We're saying Hashem Echad, that the Bria, that creation is from Hashem. So that's the lower Hashem. So here he expresses it. Shahu gavoya yoser mebechinas havaya echad, which is the same paradigm, tzimtzum, hispashtus, hamshacha, the yud, and then the hey and the vav, which is liyos bechinas dibur, which allows for the spoken word as opposed to the machshava, the hey, the first hey, like for those who learned Igeres HaTshuva, that the Alter Rebbe discusses the two heys, Shemizeh Sheirish Hishavu Zayinakim Va'aretz, and the Daled Ruchas Ha'olam, which are all merumas in the Ches and Daled of Echad. Ukenal b'Marshal Me'alev, like he explained, that there's Chayas to Dibur and to the Mayach, Lachshev Ulaharer, the higher form of the person, and then there's the lower. V'harei Amshocha lebechinas Machshave Hu Gavaya Yoser. And now he answers, V'zeu shenemar, that's why in Shema Yisrael the word Hashem appears twice. V'zeu shenemar beis shemis havaya. V'kach yuvan gam kein lamayla shepirush havaya lekeinu. What is the meaning of the first half of the clause? Hainu neshamis Yisrael olav machshava hu gavaya yisrael b'chinas hamshacha b'chinas dibur, and afilu b'chinas malachim. Like it says in the pasuk, "Uberuach piv kol tzevam," that the malachim are also bedibur, mashenk in the neshamas. The inyan shebechin asavaya echad einay neufel loshen echad. Ki im, when is echad appropriate? Only when there's ishtalshalus of shamayim va'aretz and shehem bechina shisha ktsavis ruchniim v'gashmiim. V'hu yizbarech echad bahem lefi shehem betelim elav yizbarech. Because there's bittul ha'elamis. Avo b'chinas havaya lekeinu. Dam shachaz b'chinas yachid. Shehu yizbarech yachid meyuchad hu levadehu. Kemaimer, like we say in davening in the morning, zera yitzchok yechidoi. A one and only. And that's the chayi hachayim. Shelamayla afilu mib'chinas chayim aruchniim. Even greater than malachim. Shehu b'chinas v'ata mechayes kulam. V'ata is dibur. Aleph through Tov and the Hey are the 5 articulators. Hey Moitzoi Sapeh. And that's beneath the Shema Yisrael of Yisrael Olub Machshava. Zeu Mechalkel Chayim. Okay, that's the Chayim that we're talking about. That the Eibishter gives a Yid. I'll just say as a Nekuda, that sometimes people feel uncomfortable with this machshava when we say, oh, a yid is am hanivchar, and that, chosen, and we have a certain ruchnius that's beyond. I don't know. We look around. Where is it? Right? It doesn't feel like it. So here, the Alter Rebbe places a position of what it means to be Olu b'machshava, and then the Alter Rebbe tells us how to get there. In other words, not even beyond ruchnius of malachim. And the Alter Rebbe explains that for a person to go from one state, from the state of desiring gashmius, to a state of being drawn and of interest in ruchnius, we have to go through a state of bittul. And the Alter Rebbe uses a very heavy expression in this maimer. The Alter Rebbe says that work, avoida, only applies when a person does something against their will. He says if a person doesn't push themselves, they haven't worked. It's not avodah. And that's why also, if you've been following a little bit the last few weeks, in Dvarim also, especially in the second Maimer, the Alter Rebbe speaks a lot about the importance of iskafia. And here the Alter Rebbe explains that by Moshe Rabbeinu it says, here he goes to the Alter Rebbe goes to the extreme space. He discusses the Avodah Zarah of Pa'or, which the Avodah Zarah of Pa'or, the people would defecate in front of the Avodah Zarah. And he says, what were they doing? The idea was that they were serving psoilas. They were trying to extract as much excrement as possible, because they're saying that's what we care about. We care about Taivas Olam Hazeh. We care about Mayim Tachtoinim. We're not interested in the divine element. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Vaneshev Bagai. We sat in the valley. So obviously a valley is a place of humility. But also the inyan of Vaneshev, sitting, which is what we do when we say Shema. Shmeina Esrei is Ba'amida, and Krias Shema is Miyushav. So he speaks about the symbolism of this inyan, of being in a state of hisyashvus, of humbling ourselves in the inyan of Shema. And that's how we come to the position of B'chol Ma'oitcha. So he says, what does it mean to be humble? To be humble means to set aside your interest. It's only if you desire something and you set it aside that you experienced humility. And that's how we come to a place of B'chol Ma'itcha. That's the inyan of Avodah. Let's see the Lashonis. Let's see exactly the way the Alter Rebbe expresses this inyan. So he says, that for a Yid, the inyan of the Eibishter is Yochid. Like there's no olam. Echad is Hashem Echad with the world. For Elekeinu, it's Yochid, there's no world. The world is not Teifes Mokim. So Chei Ho'ilamim Melech, Shehu Yizbarech Yochid Umiyuchad V'chei Ho'ilamim, Einei Elam B'chinas Melech. Even this highest darga of oneness is only from the Malchus of Hashem. Ki Imcha Meker Chayim. Ukeshem Izbeinin Bazeh. Meaning that the Eibishter, the way Hashem has a shaykhis to Yidden, is in the singular form, meaning that the neshama is called Yechida because it receives from Ibchinas Yachid. So Vayidei is bein in the zoo, memele yavi lebechinas v'yahavtas Hashem lekecha mamash b'cholavavcha b'chinas yechida shebenefesh. This will bring the union of Avas Hashem not as because Hashem gives me my pleasures. Hashem is the source of all my taivas. I gotta love Him. Imagine the Eibusha could have made the whole world in black and white. He made it colorful. Thank you, Hashem. Or any other form of Avas Hashem that's based on Gashmias. That's a lower level. That's Avatato. But the union of Yachid is a different conversation. A Yid once told me, it's a joke. I don't know if it's appropriate, not for the ear of the room. He said that there were a few people, they went to in an amusement park, there was a scale, you put in a quarter, and it tells you your weight and a lucky number. You know, it has a little, so he says, this person went and that person, then the Yid went. So it says, Shoite, sinish fayidin. Yeah, goylem, this is not for Yidden. I mean, you know, so, right, that's the Indian Melech Yochid. That's, we love the Eibishter. Why? Because he gave us Gashmias. Like we say, Shmini Atzeres. The Eibishter Fabrein, they celebrated. Now the Eibishter says, "Me and you, Beivene Galgal Aniva Ato." It's a whole different level. That's the union of Yochid, and he says that's where every Yid is rooted. That Yechida shebenefesh shebechol nitzus ha'adam kivyochol Yisrael olav machshava. V'alzeh Amar Meish Rabbeinu olav hashalom. Meish Rabbeinu says v'aneishev bagoy. By the way, the Tzemach Tzedek explains that this pasuk is a very random pasuk. It's just suddenly in the middle of nowhere. It says, "Oh, by the way, we settled in v'aneishev bagoy mul beis pa'ir." In this week's perek, yeah, and that's the end of the perek. V'ata Yisrael shema lachukim ve'la mishpatim. Now let's learn something. What's the shaykhis? What is he telling us? He says, "K'shehizir al Mishnah Torah." But Moshe Rabbeinu came to tell the Yidden to repeat the mitzvahs and to recommit to fulfilling the mitzvahs. So he said, "Sheyiyah, where should that be? Mul beis pa'ir, a cross. Pa'ir hu Shema avodah zarah." And what was that avodah zarah? What was that idol worship? They wanted to fortify, to strengthen taivas. Like a ben seder to meida. In other words, the ben seder to meida, you know, some of you are familiar. The Rambam, among the things that he wrote, was the king of Egypt ordered him to instruct him on how to enjoy the pleasures of the world as much as possible. And I think David Blech translated it into English. Maybe he was also forced by the king. Akoponim, so the Rambam writes a little introduction. And he says, really, I don't believe in such a life. Right? I believe in a more minimalistic, a life of asceticism, you know, but I'm your servant, and you can, you know, so, and here are the instructions, you know, and there goes the pamphlet. That the idea of Pa'ir was to maximize Taivas Olam Hazeh. That's their Indian, like a Ben Seder. The Ben Seder Umayra, it's not just that he's enjoying the Gashmias. He's dafke enjoying things. He's like, show me where I could get addicted. Show me the most addictive substance. That's what I want. Right? He's looking to be drawn, to be as earthy as possible. Like the Pasuk says, Ruach HaBehema Yeredes Lamata. Like they say, the mashal, the Chazer, he's in till here, he's asking the Eibishter a little more. Put it on my head. That to go further. Lochein, therefore, what was their avoida? Hoyu matrizin atzmon. Lahamshich hapseilas chulu. So that was their practice. Ukumesh kosu beitz chaim shalom adalef perek hey. For lochein hizir, that's why Moshe said, V'aneishev ba'goy mul beis pa'er. Goy is a valley. Hainu b'chinas shiflus. V'achnoa ubitul elav yizbarich, which is mul. It's the heipech of beis pa'er, the opposite. What does the pasuk say? If you follow Baal Pa'er, if that's what you're here for pursuit of Gashmias, where do we find such extreme language? Hashem wipes you out. Like they don't exist. If you're dovuk to the Eibishter, Chayim. That's the inyan of Krias Shema. Shehim meyushiv. Krias Shema is liyas b'chinas bittul. Limser nafshei be'echad. What is Mesiras Nefesh? So he says, here's a whole other inyan that the Alter Rebbe explains. The Alter Rebbe is coming to answer now why the Anshe Knesses Agdoila were misakein Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchusay in between. So he says, in Bayis Rishon, the Yidden were in a state of, they were in an elevated state, a state of oneness with Hashem. They saw it, they experienced it. They were also naturally in a state of neder. Someone once, I was speaking once to an elderly person, and he said, he shared with me something that if you weren't there, how would you know? He says, I remember in the 1950s, in the 1960s, when they would invite the Eltere Chassidim to a simcha, they would all come to the simcha. No one ate. It never occurred to them to eat because there's food on the table. It just didn't look. That wasn't the way it worked. He says it's. I don't mean over here. Our wives are not here, and we come and we eat gesund eat. It says ka'achilaschem kein teiraschem. So please eat gesund eat. But this idea, today, what do you mean? You come to a place, there's food, you eat. Who is it for, right? So it's a different. So he says over here, this in the time of Bayis Rishon, there was naturally an inyan of neder. Like the way I imagine those Yidden, that the fact that they were passing Taivas Gashmias didn't talk to them. They weren't drawn to it. Neder. He says nowadays we say Beloi Neder. Why do we say Beli Neder? Because we're so distracted. It's tricky. It's like even inadvertently we get pulled into Gashmias. So today, the intensity of our experience with Gashmias is so strong that Elikus doesn't talk to us. And that's the inyan of Baruch Shem. Baruch Shem is that now we have to bring the Eibishter much closer to us. Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchusay La'olam. We have to draw down. Chassidishe explains, shame is to draw down, and Kvoid, and Malchusay, and La'olam. We have to draw the Eibishter to bring him closer. And the only way that's possible is with iskafia. If we're in a state of that if our interest is Gashmias, then Elikus doesn't talk to us. So here the Alter Rebbe will express it. So he says, Kaidem hachurben bayis rishon, shehoyu neshamis gevoyhos, hoyu yecholim lehagia leviahafta, aydei hizbeinus levat Shema Yisrael chulu viahafta. When they said Shema, they had Avos Hashem. They said Shema twice a day, they had Avos Hashem. I'm going to mention, I heard a sikha this week where the Rebbe says that being that nowadays our neshamis, the oir of our neshamis are diminished, therefore the taivas that we receive are also much more delicate. The intensity of our taiva is weakened.
It's not the same. Aval achar hachurban, we can't, it doesn't work. Shema Yisrael doesn't bring about via hafta. Ela yidei baruch shem kveid malchus eila eilam void. It's only through baruch shem. What is baruch shem? Kabbalas oil malchus shamayim. To take upon ourselves the yoke of Hashem. What is Kabbalas oil? Kabbalas oil means to set aside my interest for the interest of Hashem. Ubazeh meturatz hakushya deleil. Now we have an answer of Lama in kol echad magia lebchinas v'yahavta. Why we don't all have Avos Hashem? We're all from a Yidden. We all say v'yahavta. We all say Shema. Ki kedei lagia achshov lebchinas v'yahavta. Nowadays, tzarich liyisayidei kabbalas el malchus shamayim. We need to have that discipline for the sake of Hashem, not for the sake of self-control. When you learn Tanya, the Alter Rebbe speaks about Iskafia. He says they were ma'acher seudosam bekavona zu. You have to think it's for Hashem, not for me. Not to show shleimus ha'adam. Oh, because I have self-control. Oh, I'm a very disciplined person. No, it has to be kabbalas el malchus shamayim, because the Eibishter is putting a limit on what we want to do. And that's the inyan of Baruch Shem Kved Malchus El Eilam Vod Sheitzrichu Loymar Kodim V'After that the Anshe Knesses Agdoila enacted. The Hainu inyan leachfaya sitra achra. The Hainu, that's what the Mishnah says. Batel Ritzoincha. What is Bitul Rotzen? Bitul HaRotzoin Gashmi. Hu Bechinas Avoida. The Kabbalas El Malchus Shemayim Yizbarich. The Ein Melech Beloy Am. Loshen Oimimus. Oimimus mean that the light is ebbing, that it's a low, shehu yesh, the dover, the inyan of malchus is when there's something outside. The point that the Alter Rebbe is making is very powerful. If you have a yid who's naturally inclined to learn Torah, to be Mekayim mitzvahs, then the Eibishter is not his king. He's like a ben. There's no malchus on family. Malchus is on strangers. What makes someone a stranger? Taivus. It's only those who have taivus that could make the Eibishter a king. Ein melech b'loy am. Oh, oimimus, by you, the chayes is ebbing. There's barely, and then you're going to be mekabel el malchus shamayim. Afal pikei mevatel ritzoyim mikol v'chol. That's, and he says like this, that v'chol davar she'enei bebitul haratzen. Anything that's not with mitabeg, einei nikra avoda klal. That's this line. It's not avodas Hashem. Ubitul ratzen hainu kipshutay. It's simple. Let's keep it simple. La'asais heipech ma shehalev chaymed. Do the opposite of what you want. Heim b'bchinas surmeira. Heim b'bchinas vasei toiv. In surmeiras kadesh atzmcha b'mutelach. Meaning, if someone says, "What do I want? I want things that are forbidden." We're not in a conversation. We're not kadesh atzmcha b'mutelach, not ba'asulach. It's only b'mutelach. That's where, in other words, ba'asulach. In that, there's no avodah there. V'hu b'chinas neder. V'ishki yideh neder la'Hashem nedarim siag la'prishus. Prishus maybe l'dekdusha. And that's avarabba b'chol levavcha. Talmim nemar, sometimes it says nikius, maybe l'dei prishus. V'hainu shekori d'ma churban. Hisigu b'chinas neder. They naturally came to a state of neder. Neder iu le'ela v'inun chaya. They're living in a place of life. They're living in an elevated space. They're contained. It's the opposite of prikas oil, opposite of pelishtim. Pelishtim, mavi mefulish. Everything that a person wants, they desire. Right? The whole Indian, the Indian of browsing is to be open to anything that comes. That's the opposite of the Indian of neder. Aval kehayoim, but nowadays, what do we say? Anu oimrim bili neder. That's all in the sur meira space. In Asei Tov, it's the opposite. Shkida, a lot of, to work, to do a lot of good things. Hainu, what does this mean? Like the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, and he brings more examples.
Shoyne pirkei mea pa'amim. L'shoyne pirkei mea pa'amim ve'echad. She'apam ve'echad, the one time more than your habit, shu yesem meregilusay, chashuv mimeya is more important than the 100 asher hu regilusay. I remember once I was at a Fabrengen as a bacher, and at that time, Shabbos, there was no Seder in Yeshiva because we would all go daven at 770 with the Rebbe's minyan. And I remember the Mashpia said, if you don't learn Shabbos, everything that you learned the whole week is bottle. So I said, why? He says, because during the week you have Seder, so you don't really have a choice. But Shabbos, it's up to you. If you learn Shabbos, you validate what happened the whole week. And that's what, in other words, why did I learn? Because I had Seder, because I wanted to learn Chassidus. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. Hameya va'achas, that little bit that you pushed yourself, it validates everything that you did before, that it becomes Avodah. The Alter Rebbe gives another example. When a person gives even a penny more, more than what is a common, what he's used to, that's choshuv b'yoser. It's very valuable, more than the regilus. And that's Kabbalah Sayom Achos Shamayim. It's through this that Yochel Lavi Lebechinas Via Hafta to come to the union of B'chol Ma'oitcha. And Rabbi say, I encourage you over Shabbos to complete the last part of the Maimer. I'm sure there are many of you who have more time, but our Seder is that we end at 9. Okay, Yashakayach for the opportunity. And Mirz Hashem, the words should give light inside. Maitzoi Matzah Chayim.